It was a very scary sight last weekend. A barge and tanker collide in the Houston Ship Channel and thousands of gallons of oil released into the bay. It halted ship traffic, including cruise ships, but more importantly, began to immediately impact the environment, coating birds, soiling the shore. The question is, what will the long-term impact of this be, and what can be done to stop spills like this from happening again? Here to answer some of those questions, or at least talk about it, Bob Stokes, the president of the Galveston Bay Foundation, whose purpose it is to protect and preserve the bay's natural resources, and Scott Smith, the chief scientist for the organization Water Defense, and who invented a system to actually clean polluted systems and to also help work to clean up the BP Gulf disaster. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you.
And Scott, you've been involved in a number of these spills before. I mean, this is not a huge spill compared to a lot of other spills, but it still can do a great deal of impact.
Oh, this is very significant because 1 gallon of oil contaminates 1 million gallons of water. So do the math times 160,000 gallons. And it's very simple. Oil and water should not mix. And when they do, nothing but bad things happen. And oil is complicated. It contains molecules that are heavier than water. And the concerning thing here is the water column. What is above the bottom, beneath the surface. Life happens in the water column. For example, I was at that Cincinnati Sunoco pipeline spill last week. We just got some results back. We're detecting 400 parts per billion of mercury. And the EPA threshold is 2 parts per billion. So what we're doing here is we're testing the water column because there are metals, there are semi-volatile, there's a whole range of chemicals, and people think because there's no black oil, it's the clear, colorless, odorless chemicals and the metals that are moving around that water column that we need to fingerprint.
And Scott, we talk about those things that kind of sink to the bottom. I mean, that could be really devastating for those folks who spend their lives dealing with fishing and shrimping and that sort of thing. Could be a devastating kind of thing.
That's correct. When you test the water, they're taking instantaneous samples for a split second from the surface. A fish doesn't swim in the water for a split second. Our children, we don't bathe or swim in the water for a split second. So if you're really going to test for exposure, you got to test what accumulates over a time period in the entire water column.
Is that part of what what's in the bottle?
That's correct. This is an open cell material called Opflex that we use at Water Defense to test the water column. And we are taking this to a third-party lab in Houston that we work with, and we're going to figure out if there's metals in it. This is the first test we pulled from Galveston.
And what's the challenge in getting water clean once it's contaminated? That seems the biggest challenge overall.
We did a flyover yesterday, and here's, I was on the ground in the BP oil spill. Separately, I invented the only technology that was endorsed and reused by BP, and as covered in the USA Today out of 43,000 ideas. But the point is, they're still using white paper towels with those booms, and the wind and the moving water, it's everywhere, and it could have been contained and removed. There's so many great technologies out there, and we're now approaching, it's an eerie feeling, we're approaching the 4-year anniversary of BP, and none of the lessons learned were applied here. If those lessons had been applied in the best available technologies, you wouldn't see a pilot yesterday when we were up in the helicopter calling in more oil from 10 miles out. You wouldn't see any of this. So it's amazing.
Are you optimistic about the outcome in this case and perhaps other spills in terms of the technology that's available?
Well, I'm an optimist, but you got to be a realist, and that starts with the best available technology to clean up the spills. It's not being used, but if we diagnose and fingerprint what's in the water, we can solve. To solve a problem, you have to diagnose the problem. And what we're here to do is Water Defense as a nonprofit is to diagnose the problem, so then it can be solved.
And you think that once that starts to happen long term, perhaps other areas when they have this kind of issue, it'll be something will be in place to help them resolve this problem?
Absolutely, and this spill can be cleaned up and contained, and people and the environment can be protected.
Well, we hope that what we have now is not going to get much worse. We know that, thanks to you guys, we know what the reality is right now. We trust with your input from your organization, we can make sure we don't have this sort of thing happen again, but when it does, we can make sure we can clean it up. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Campbell. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.